What if the woman you just humiliated in your showroom, the one in dusty boots and a worn-out coat, was the billionaire who signed your paycheck? What if your entire career, your reputation, your future, depended on how you treated the one person you assumed was beneath you? In a world obsessed with appearances, one woman strips everything away to test the soul of her empire. But what she discovers will shatter more than pride. This is not just a story about luxury cars or corporate power. This is a story about who we are when no one's watching, and what happens when the person you looked down on owns everything you stand on. The sun scorched the pavement outside the sleek chrome and glass dealership like a spotlight, burning down on a world polished for performance and perception. Inside, cool air hummed against the silence of high-dollar engines, leather interiors, and showroom polish. Salesmen in tailored suits circled customers like sharks around gold. And then she entered, wearing a faded denim jacket 2 decades out of date, her boots scuffed from more than one rainy sidewalk, and a canvas tote slung over her shoulder like a forgotten afterthought. She looked more like someone delivering lunch than someone looking to buy a vehicle. Her salt and pepper hair was twisted up in a simple clip. No makeup, no rings, no noise, just presence. Still, her eyes, sharp and scanning, missed nothing. The gleam of tire rubber, the subtle dust near the back row, the way the floor manager's gaze slid right past her without pause. At the front desk, a young woman with crimson lipstick and a bored look on her face barely glanced up. "Hi, are you looking for someone?" The older woman smiled politely. "No, I'm just looking." The receptionist hesitated, forcing a tight-lipped smile. "Sure, just try not to lean on the cars, okay?" With that, the woman was dismissed. She walked past the line of glossy sedans and sportbacks, stopping at a midnight blue SUV tucked in the corner. She ran her fingers gently across the chrome trim. A whisper of curiosity crossed her face. Behind her, a tall man in a slim-fit blazer and designer shoes watched with obvious disdain. His name tag read, Marcus. He sauntered over with a smirk. "Ma'am, those models start at $96,000. You sure you're in the right place?" The woman turned, still calm. "I just had a question about the suspension." Marcus blinked, amused. "Suspension?" She nodded. "Yes, multi-link or double wishbone. Some of the newer models claim both, but they don't always specify." Marcus chuckled like she'd just asked how to build a rocket. "That's not really something you need to worry about, ma'am. Trust me. Most of our buyers care about sound systems, not, suspension." A few customers nearby glanced over. One couple giggled. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing. She moved to the next car. "What about this one? Is the ECU flashed to restrict torque, or do you give full access to factory specs?" Marcus now looked annoyed. "Look, lady, if you're just here to kill time, we've got a coffee machine over there. Real customers usually make appointments." From the corner, another sales rep, Eva, young, observant, watched everything unfold, her face caught between discomfort and curiosity. She made a step forward, hesitated, said nothing. The woman nodded slowly and looked down at her boots. Dust from the street still clung to the soles. "I see," she said simply. Marcus smirked again, smug in his victory. "You know what? I've got a used Ford at a sister dealership. Might be more your speed. I can write down the address." She looked up, not angry, not humiliated, just tired. "That won't be necessary," and she turned to leave. But just as her hand touched the glass door, a voice rang out from the back hallway. "Wait!" Everyone turned. A man in a crisp navy suit, older, dignified, hurried forward, the floor manager. His face changed the moment he saw her. "Oh my God. Ms. Lorraine?" Marcus paled. "Ms. who?" The man nearly stumbled over his words. "Ms. Lorraine, I didn't know you were visiting today. No one told me." She turned to face them fully now, and for the first time, something shifted in her posture. She no longer stood like a woman ignored. She stood like a woman who had built the floor beneath their feet. "It's all right, Derek," she said quietly. "I wanted to see the place without the red carpet." The room fell dead silent. Marcus stepped back. "Wait, you're—" She looked him in the eye. "Lorraine Ashford, founder of Ashford Motors. This building is mine." The silence cracked like glass. Marcus stared, mouth half open, the smirk dying on his lips as Lorraine, dust still on her boots, wisdom blazing in her eyes, stood in the center of the showroom she built from nothing. A few customers whispered to one another, realizing something monumental was unfolding before them. Someone reached for their phone. Eva stood frozen behind the reception desk, her hands clutching the edge so tightly her knuckles went pale. Derek, the floor manager, was already sweating through his collar. "Ms. Lorraine, I wasn't told about any inspection visit. If I had known..." Lorraine cut him off with a wave of her hand. "If you'd known, Derek, I wouldn't have seen the truth." She turned slowly, her eyes sweeping across the room like a quiet blade. No press releases, no advance calls, no entourage. That was the point. She faced Marcus. "So, tell me, Mr..." He cleared his throat. Marcus Lorne." She nodded, as if mentally filing it. "Tell me, Marcus." "How long have you worked here?" he stammered. "A year. Just over. I'm top 3 in sales for the quarter." "Impressive," she said calmly. "And yet, in that entire time, no one taught you that the value of a customer isn't measured by the price of their shoes?" He looked down, ashamed. "No one told you," she continued, "that some people walk in dressed like ghosts, not because they're poor, but because they've built so much wealth. They no longer need to prove it." Every word hit harder than a slap. She turned to Derek. "Is this the culture we've grown? Is this what happens when the founder steps away?" Derek fumbled. "Ma'am, I promise this isn't how we usually..." She raised her voice slightly, not yelling, just sharp enough to cut. "But it is. Today wasn't a fluke. Today was normal. And that's the problem." Eva finally stepped forward, voice trembling. "Ms. Lorraine, may I say something?" Lorraine looked at her gently. "Please." Eva took a breath. "I knew something felt wrong. I saw how Marcus spoke to you. I didn't agree with it, but I didn't stop it either. I'm sorry." For a long moment, Lorraine said nothing. Then she smiled. Not a cruel smile, not triumphant, but one filled with a quiet grief. "Thank you, Eva. That took courage." She turned back to Marcus. "You offered me directions to a used car lot. You laughed at my questions. You spoke loudly enough for strangers to hear, as if public shaming was part of your service script. Did it make you feel powerful?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "I didn't know who you were. And that," she said softly, "is the only thing that saved you from knowing better." She looked up, addressing the room. This company was built on respect, on treating janitors like CEOs, because sometimes they are. Today we failed that legacy, but tomorrow we correct it. Then she walked to the glass doors again, this time not as a dismissed old woman, but as a storm in human form. She paused, turned once more, and said one final thing. "Shut down this showroom for the rest of the day, not as punishment, as a reflection. And tomorrow morning, don't come in expecting business as usual. Come in ready to answer a much harder question. What kind of person are you when no one's watching?" With that, she stepped into the light, leaving behind a room full of people who suddenly didn't like the sound of their own silence. When Lorraine returned the next morning, the staff was already gathered, tense and silent, most of them unsure whether they were walking into a meeting or a reckoning. No customers had been allowed in. The showroom was eerily quiet, the roar of engines replaced by the sound of nervous breath and the soft hum of ceiling lights. Lorraine didn't stand on the podium. She stood beside the cars, the same way any other customer would, one hand lightly resting on the hood of a silver hybrid sedan. "This," she began, voice even but commanding, "is where the illusion lives, where we polish chrome and rehearse smiles, where we train people to recognize credit scores by the cut of a jacket. Today, I want to see what's beneath all that." She gestured to the car. "Who can tell me whether this model's drivetrain is electronically limited or if it runs to factory max?" A few heads turned toward Marcus, who stayed silent, sweat beading at his temple. One younger man raised a hesitant hand. "I believe it's electronically limited, ma'am." She nodded. "Correct. And what's the torque cap?" 442 pound-feet. "Good. Now, tell me why it was downgraded from last year's model." The man blinked, faltered. I don't know." Lorraine turned away, not in anger, but in quiet disappointment. She walked to another car, a black performance coupe. "How many people here know that this vehicle's VIN was originally assigned to the European export fleet?" No one responded. Lorraine placed her hand on the windshield. "That's right. This car was meant for Germany. The original spec included lane assist calibration for Autobahn travel, but that's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because I want to know, do you understand the story behind what you sell?" She turned toward them all now, eyes sharp. Or do you just memorize numbers, smile, and decide who's worthy based on whose watch is shinier? Eva stood straighter. I don't know the VIN story, ma'am, but I'd like to learn. I do try to learn everything I can, but I don't ask as many questions as I should. Lorraine walked closer. That's honest, and honesty, Eva, is a rarity I intend to reward. She turned to Marcus, who now looked like a child caught copying a test. What do you know about this car? He muttered, it's a bestseller. It's got good margins. Customers love the stereo. Anything else? She pressed. He shook his head. I know enough to sell it. But not enough to serve it, she replied, or to serve the people who walk in here looking like I did yesterday. That's the difference between a salesman and a steward. One takes money, the other builds trust. No one said a word. Lorraine looked around the room, her voice now quieter but far more powerful. My late husband once told me, the day we stop asking questions is the day we stop deserving answers. Yesterday I came here with a question. You treated me like an inconvenience. Today, I'm your answer. And I'm not looking for apologies. I'm looking for growth. She turned to Eva again. Would you walk with me? Eva nodded, heart pounding, and followed her as she walked the floor once more, not as a stranger now, but as a woman searching for what had been lost beneath the polish. As Lorraine walked the floor with Eva by her side, the rest of the staff stood frozen, unsure whether to follow, speak, or simply disappear into the walls. A few of them exchanged nervous glances, hoping the storm would pass quickly. But Lorraine had no intention of letting this pass like any other inspection. She wasn't here to evaluate sales numbers. She was here to shake the very foundation of what they thought they understood. Do you know, she said softly to Eva as they approached the oldest car in the showroom, a classic Ashford Vantage coupe, that this car was the first prototype I ever approved personally? Eva looked at her in awe. You were involved that far back? Lorraine nodded. I didn't just approve it. I helped design the original chassis. Back then, the company was still running out of a 2-bay garage in Tallahassee. I soldered wires and pulled 14-hour shifts. I used to change oil with these hands. She paused, lifting her palms, now elegant but scarred. You see the shine now, Eva, but no one sees the blood that built it. Behind them, Derek approached slowly, wringing his hands. Ms. Lorraine, if I may, the team is rattled. I think some of them didn't understand who you were when you came in yesterday. Lorraine turned to face him, eyes level. That was the test. And they failed. Not because they didn't recognize me, but because they didn't recognize value when it wasn't wrapped in silk. He looked down. I take full responsibility. No, you don't, she said sharply. Because if you did, you wouldn't need to say it. You'd already be making changes. She walked toward the central sales desk. Customers had begun trickling in, but the front doors remained locked. Today the business wasn't open. Today the soul of the business was on trial. Lorraine reached into her tote bag and pulled out a faded folder. She handed it to Derek. This is the original ownership contract for this building, signed 15 years ago, with my name on every page. I paid for this land in cash when banks laughed at the idea of a woman starting an auto empire. Derek flipped through the pages, his face draining. Some of the staff craned their necks to glimpse the signatures. Lorraine Ashford, printed boldly, again and again. She turned back to the room. I built this place because I believed in people, in second chances, in proving that integrity could exist in an industry addicted to flash. And I stepped away not to disappear, but to see who would carry that torch without supervision. She scanned their faces. Some of you did. Some of you didn't. Marcus looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. He opened his mouth, but Lorraine stopped him with a simple gesture. Not yet. You'll speak when I ask you to. Eva stood silently beside her, uncertain of what to do with the weight of the moment. Lorraine glanced at her. How long have you been here? 6 months, Eva replied. I started right out of school. I needed the job badly, so I stayed quiet. You saw what happened yesterday, Lorraine said. And today you stepped forward when no one else did. She turned to the rest of the staff. Let me be clear. This showroom may be built on my money, but the next version of it will be built on your choices. If you can't serve with respect, you will not serve at all. Someone in the back scoffed quietly, then tried to hide it. Lorraine's eyes snapped to him. You have something to say? He hesitated, then muttered, So, what now? You just fired everyone? No, she said. I don't fire people for making mistakes. I remove people who refuse to learn from them. And with that, She walked toward the private conference room, not looking back. Meeting starts in 10 minutes. Everyone, no exceptions. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but its echo shook the walls harder than any slammed fist. Long before the marble floors, before the logo gleamed above the showroom glass, before the name Ashford meant anything beyond a dusty Florida alley behind a gas station, there was just Lorraine and an old toolbox. She was 22, barely 5 feet tall, and the only female mechanic in a town that spat every time she showed up in overalls. The garage she worked for back then didn't even give her a locker. She kept her uniform folded in a grocery bag, changing in the bathroom, washing grease off her arms with powdered soap, and hot water that stung her skin raw. Customers would double-check their oil after she changed it. Men called her sweetheart, or worse. But she kept showing up. Every morning before sunrise, staying long after the others clocked out. Not to prove them wrong, but because the cars, they made sense. Unlike people. Unlike men who lied, or systems that failed her father when he died of heart failure in a waiting room where no one treated him like he mattered. The first time she dreamed of owning her own garage, it was just a whisper in her mind, a flicker. She wrote it on a sticky note and stuck it inside her locker. One day, Lorraine Ashford Motors. No one saw it. No one had to. She saved every dime. She slept in her cousin's shed for 3 years to avoid rent. She bought her first lot at an auction with cash in an envelope and no bank to back her. It was a concrete skeleton behind a broken fence in Kissimmee. No signage, no lifts. Just a rusted-out truck she rebuilt with her own hands and sold to her first customer, a single mom with 2 kids and no credit. Lorraine never forgot the look in that woman's eyes when she realized she could drive away with dignity, not debt. That became the rule. Dignity first. Lorraine grew slowly, deliberately. No outside investors, no shortcuts. She hired people who reminded her of herself. Quiet, underestimated, brilliant. She paid them well. Trained them better. She taught them not just to sell, but to listen. And when her husband came into her life, a gentle, stubborn war veteran who loved engines more than words, he became her partner, not her rescuer. They built the brand together. He handled logistics. She designed the experience. Then one day, just like her father before, he collapsed without warning. The hospital tried, but they were too late. And for the second time in her life, Lorraine stood in a hallway, holding silence like a blade. She disappeared after that, sold her house, transferred operations to a board of directors, kept the company under her thumb through trusts and shell names. No one recognized her anymore when she walked through the stores, and she liked it that way. She wanted to see what would survive in her absence, what her legacy was really built on. And when she stepped back into the Tallahassee showroom for the first time in 7 years, she saw her answer, clear as glass. Shame, entitlement, performance without soul. And one girl, one Eva, whose eyes still carried the honesty Lorraine remembered in herself when she first held a wrench and whispered, "I want more than this world says I can have." Now, standing in the empty conference room, staring at the black and white photo of the original Ashford garage pinned on the wall, Lorraine placed her hand over her heart and whispered to the past, "I remember, James. I remember everything, and I'm going to fix it." The conference room was quiet, not the heavy silence of tension, but the thinner, sharper kind that filled the space between guilt and realization. Lorraine stood at the head of the long glass table, sleeves rolled, hair still tied back the same way she wore it under her first welding mask. No one spoke as she looked slowly from face to face. Derek sweating in his chair, Marcus pretending to take notes, 3 sales reps too afraid to make eye contact, and Eva sitting near the end, trying to hide how hard her heart was beating. Lorraine folded her arms. "Before I say anything, I'd like to hear from you. Anyone. Tell me what happened yesterday from your point of view." No one moved. She let the silence stretch. That's the problem. You see, when silence benefits you, it's easy to call it professionalism. When silence costs someone else their dignity, it's suddenly just policy. So, let's try again. What did you see yesterday? A young man on the left finally spoke. "I saw a woman being dismissed unfairly. I didn't say anything because I thought maybe she was just confused or wasting time." Lorraine nodded. "And when did you figure out that wasn't true?" He swallowed. "When you said your name." She looked to the right side of the room. "Anyone else?" More silence. Then finally, Eva's voice. Quiet, shaking slightly, but honest. I saw something I've seen before, just not here. In my old job, back at a diner, I saw people treated differently all the time, based on how they dressed, how they smelled, what kind of phone did they had. I always hated it. I thought this place was different. She paused. I still want it to be. Lorraine didn't smile, but her eyes softened. Thank you, Eva. She walked around the table slowly. The point of my visit yesterday wasn't to scare you. It was to expose something none of you realized had gone missing. Respect, not just for the customer, for yourselves. Because when you rely on assumptions to do your job, you lose your instinct. And without instinct, you stop seeing people. You start selling stories instead of cars, image instead of reliability. And eventually, it rots the company from the inside. She stopped behind Marcus. You were the loudest voice in the room yesterday, and today you've been the quietest. Marcus spoke, finally, low and forced. There's nothing I can say that would make it right. I judged you. I judged who I thought you were. No, Lorraine said calmly. You judged who you hoped I wasn't. He looked down. I was wrong. She nodded. You were, but wrong can be corrected. Arrogance cannot. Then she walked to the head of the table again. I'm not firing anyone today, not yet. But tomorrow morning, this dealership closes for a full week. And during that time, every single one of you will undergo reorientation, conducted by me, personally. If you refuse, you'll be let go. If you make excuses, you'll be replaced. If you come in with open ears and open eyes, then we rebuild this place together. She glanced at Eva. There are few voices in the world that cut through comfort. Yours did. Don't lose that. It's rare. Eva flushed, trying not to cry. Lorraine stepped back. Meeting dismissed. As the staff slowly filed out, some in thought, some in shame, and others in quiet resentment, Lorraine remained standing, watching, listening, not as a CEO, but as a woman waiting to see if anyone would finally see her, without needing the title. The reorientation began on a Tuesday, but by Wednesday afternoon, no one dared treat it like a routine. Lorraine didn't give lectures. She gave moments, surgical, intentional, unflinching. She walked them through the customer experience step by step, not with charts, but with stories. She made them role play, asked impossible questions, and then waited for the answer they were afraid to say. And by the fourth day, something broke, not in discipline, but in silence. It was during a group session about empathy that Lorraine paused and said, "Today I want to talk about debt." The word hung in the air. Everyone leaned forward a little. She continued, "Not the kind that shows up on your credit report. I'm talking about the kind no one sends a bill for, the kind that's paid in private." She looked around the room until her eyes landed on Marcus, who visibly stiffened. "You have a sister, Marcus?" He blinked. Yes. Jessica. Why?" Lorraine nodded slowly. "And your mother? Is she still living?" "She is. Lives in Winter Haven now. Moved there after her last stroke." His voice softened, confused. "She's doing okay." Lorraine stepped forward. Does she still remember the woman who paid her hospital bill 21 years ago when she was uninsured, unconscious, and near death? Marcus went pale. "What are you talking about?" Lorraine's voice didn't rise. If anything, it grew quieter. She collapsed at a flea market, heat stroke. An ambulance took her to St. Margaret's. The doctor said that without immediate care, she wouldn't survive. The nurse asked who would sign off on the emergency treatment. No family had arrived yet. But I had seen your little sister crying outside, barefoot, holding your hand. So I stepped in. She let the silence settle. Marcus whispered, "That was you?" Lorraine nodded. "I didn't put my name on the form. I told the nurse to say it was anonymous, because I didn't do it to be remembered. I did it because it was right." The room fell completely still. No one moved, no one breathed. Even Derek, seated in the corner, wiped a hand across his face, like trying to shake off a dream. Marcus looked down at the floor. His voice cracked. "I had no idea. I was just a kid." "And yesterday," Lorraine said, "you looked at me like I was nothing, like I didn't belong near leather seats and polished glass. You gave me directions to the nearest used lot, not because you knew me, but because you didn't. And in that moment, you judged a stranger with the same eyes a younger version of yourself once feared being judged by." He stood, shaky, shame drowning his voice. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Lorraine said. "You just have to decide who you'll be now that you do know." A full minute passed before anyone else spoke. Finally, Eva raised her hand. Not to interrupt, but like a student asking permission to breathe. Why didn't you tell him before? Why keep that a secret? Lorraine looked at her with something almost like a smile. Because kindness loses its purity the moment it demands recognition. I never wanted to thank you. I wanted him to live. That was enough. Then she turned back to the group. You all have your own debts. Moments someone showed up for you when they didn't have to. That debt isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to shape you. If you forget it, you become the very thing that once nearly destroyed you. Marcus sat back down, burying his face in his hands. He didn't speak again for the rest of the day. Lorraine let the room absorb the weight in its own way. She knew not everyone would get it, not everyone would change, but for the first time in years, she saw something shift in the eyes of the people around her. Not fear, not guilt, but something stronger, remembrance. By the end of the 5th day, something in the air had shifted. People weren't just showing up on time. They were showing up differently, more alert, quieter. The noise of forced charm was gone, replaced by something deeper, self-reflection. But Lorraine wasn't finished, not even close. On the final day of reorientation, she walked into the main office with a slim folder in hand and a decision no one expected. This showroom, she said clearly, will be closed until further notice. The room froze. Derek stood from his seat, pale. Closed, ma'am? Lorraine nodded. Yes, not because of poor sales, not because of profit margins, but because the foundation it stood on has cracked, and no amount of polish will cover that. She looked around. I am not destroying this place. I'm giving it a chance to breathe again. There was murmuring, a few gasps, and then silence. She continued. For the next 4 weeks, every employee will be reevaluated, not by performance metrics, but by character. We will rebuild this team, this environment, and this reputation brick by brick. Anyone who cannot align with the values we were meant to represent will not return. Someone in the back raised their hand, hesitant. But what happens to us in the meantime? Do we keep our jobs? Lorraine looked him in the eye. You keep your honesty. You keep your integrity. The rest will follow, if you choose it. That's when Eva stood up. No one expected her to speak. Ms. Lorraine, if I may? Lorraine nodded. Go ahead. Eva's voice was soft but steady. I want to be part of whatever this becomes. I don't know everything yet. But I know I don't want to be the kind of person who stays silent anymore. I want to build this with you. Lorraine studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, not the kind that ends conversations, but the kind that begins revolutions. Then you'll be the first. She placed the folder on the table. In here is a blueprint. Not for a building, for a culture, one we forgot, one we now have a chance to remember. Derek swallowed hard. And the rest of us? Lorraine didn't flinch. You'll each decide, not with your words, with what you do next. Later that afternoon, the showroom's glass doors were locked. The lights dimmed. The advertisements came down. People passing by saw the luxury dealership go to dark and wondered if it had failed. But what they didn't see was what had begun in that silence. A reckoning, a rerouting, a realignment of soul. Lorraine stood alone in the center of the floor once more. This time, not to test or to judge, but to promise. She whispered to the concrete beneath her feet like an old friend. We begin again, but this time, we do it right. 2 weeks after the lights dimmed and the doors closed, the employees returned to the showroom, but this time, not as salespeople. Lorraine had stripped the space bare. No cars, no promotional banners, just folding chairs arranged in a circle under the skylight. The first thing they noticed was a heavy velvet folder placed on the center seat, and beside it, Lorraine. She stood not as a CEO now, but as something more elemental, like a storm that had passed and left behind clean earth. She waited until every seat was filled. Then she picked up the folder and held it close to her chest. For 30 years, I've kept control of this company like a parent holding a child's hand too tightly, she said quietly, but every empire must learn how to let go. Today, I choose who will carry forward what I spent a lifetime building. The room shifted. People sat straighter. Derek's fingers tapped his leg unconsciously. Marcus exhaled too loudly. Eva didn't move at all. Lorraine continued. This folder contains the official succession papers. It has already been notarized, witnessed, and signed. The person named inside will become the acting CEO of Ashford Motors Southeast, effective immediately. They will have full decision-making authority, including hiring, expansion, and restructuring. My role going forward will be non-executive. I will remain as founder and consultant, but the heart of this company must now beat in someone else's chest. No one breathed. Derek leaned forward, eyes wide. Marcus looked ready to faint. Lorraine opened the folder slowly. The new CEO, she said clearly, is Eva Moreno. Shock detonated like a thunderclap. Derek's jaw dropped. A few gasps echoed around the circle. Eva sat frozen, like her spine had turned to glass. What? Lorraine nodded. You heard me. You're not the most experienced. You're not the highest ranked. But you are the most awake. When it mattered most, you chose to speak. And when given the option to remain invisible, you chose presence. Eva shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. I'm not ready. No one ever is, Lorraine said. But readiness isn't about perfection. It's about integrity. Derek stood, trying to keep his voice calm. With all due respect, Ms. Lorraine, this is highly irregular. Eva hasn't even completed a full year. Lorraine turned to him, her tone firm but fair. And yet, in that 1 year, she demonstrated more character than most have shown in 5. She looked around. Let me be clear. This is not a reward. This is a responsibility, and I'm placing it in the hands of someone who values people over polish, truth over titles. Eva's eyes filled. What if I mess it up? Lorraine stepped closer, placed the folder in her hands. Then you learn, and then you rise. That's what leaders do. There was no applause, no celebration, just reverent silence. Because everyone in that room understood. They had just witnessed a changing of seasons, not a promotion, a passing of fire. Lorraine stepped back, her voice softer now. Legacy isn't about the name on the building. It's about the values that breathe inside its walls. Eva, protect that breath. Let no one suffocate it again. Eva stood slowly, tears clinging to her lashes. She looked around at the people who once towered over her, who now stared with something between awe and apology. And for the first time, she spoke with a different kind of voice. Not trembling, not unsure, but rooted. I'll give this company my whole heart, and I'll never forget what it cost to earn it. And in that moment, Lorraine smiled. Not because she was stepping down, but because finally she was lifting someone else up. The sun dipped low beyond the dealership's glass facade, casting golden beams across the now quiet showroom where it had all begun. But something had changed. Not the walls, not the floors, not the polished steel frames of cars under covers, but the people. Eva stood at the center, no longer the shy girl behind the reception desk, no longer the invisible one in meetings. She wore no heels, no tailored suit, just a simple blazer Lorraine had once left hanging in the executive office. And still, she stood like royalty. Not because of a title, because of what she carried in her chest. A heart that knew how to listen before it judged, how to act before it was safe, and how to lead not from above, but from within. Lorraine watched from a corner near the door, arms folded, a soft smile tugging at the edges of her lips. She had said what she came to say, done what she came to do. There was no plaque for it, no ceremony, just the quiet power of knowing that something was finally being entrusted to the right hands. She took a step back, then another, her boots echoing faintly on the tile. Before she reached the door, Eva turned. Their eyes met. And in that single wordless exchange, an entire legacy passed between them. Silent, whole, eternal. Outside, the parking lot was empty, except for an old motorcycle parked in the corner, the same one Lorraine had rebuilt 30 years ago with her bare hands. She walked over, removed the canvas cover, and ran her fingers along the steel. Then she swung her leg over, kicked it to life, and pulled out into the fading sunlight. Not as a billionaire, not as a boss, but as a woman finally free. No camera followed her, no headline waited. But somewhere deep in the bones of the dealership, something pulsed. Gratitude. Inside, Eva gathered the staff for the first team meeting under her name, but she didn't sit behind the executive desk. She pulled up a chair, sat among them, and said, "Before we talk business, let's talk about what we stand for." She didn't speak in slogans or brand values. She spoke about choices, small ones, daily ones, the ones that made Lorraine who she was and could make this place sacred again. One by one, the employees leaned forward. Some cried, some apologized, all listened. And far away, in a small diner Lorraine used to eat at during the early years, a young waitress found an envelope on her table after the customer left. Inside, $2,000 in cash and a note. For the moments you're judged by the shoes you wear instead of the strength you carry. Keep standing tall. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Lorraine Ashford had never believed in grand gestures, only in lasting ones. That night, as the lights of Ashford Motors dimmed and the world outside spun on, something unshakable had been born. Not just a new chapter, but a new kind of power. One no one could steal, one no one could fake. The kind built from dust, rebuilt with grace, and worn like a crown by a woman who never asked for it, but proved she was born to wear it. She left without bodyguards. No cameras followed her, no red carpet, just the quiet hum of an old motorcycle and a life finally at peace. Behind her, a new leader rose, not the loudest, not the richest, but the truest. And those who once whispered in judgment now spoke only in awe. The world didn't change that day, but a corner of it did. Because one woman reminded us all, wealth without humility is hollow, and power without heart is already lost. She didn't reclaim her throne, she redefined it. And in doing so, she crowned not just herself, but every unseen soul who chooses grace when the world offers them gold.